Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for February 26, 2026. We do not have a chair this evening, nor a vice chair. So that means we have to have a nomination and a vote for a chair for this particular meeting, if there are any nominations.
I'll nominate Charlie Hall.
A second.
No further nominations. All those in favor say by saying aye, please. And nays? Mr. Hall, you do appear to be the chair for this meeting.
Thank you. Happy to do it. So I guess the first order of business would be the approval of the agenda, but we don't have a quorum, so we can't approve it. But we'll follow it.
Sounds good. And same with the next item, the approval of minutes, no quorum, won't be able to handle that item this evening.
So I guess the next item would be citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. Jeremy? Close that piece of the agenda and go to new business. The first order of new business is CPA 2025-01 Comprehensive Plan Review, Housing Chapter by Jeremy Crute with the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. Welcome, Jeremy.
Good evening. Thank you. Once again, I'm Jeremy Crute, Director of Planning with the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. 316 Vine Street, Stanton, address. Heck, good to see you all again, and happy to talk through the housing chapter. Didn't get this in PowerPoint version, but just so you
Good. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
The survey that we did earlier takes some housing. So I'll thank you. At least for this evening, can very quickly walk through the survey results, can very quickly walk through the chapter, and I have one question in particular I'd like to run by you, and then especially we can keep, as has been our way, we can keep the focus primarily on the needs assessment and goals, and any tweaks and changes you'd like to see to that. So I guess just starting off with the survey data, as you can see, housing, not surprisingly, was a major issue identified via our survey responses. It was listed, limited affordable housing options was listed as the most or the biggest challenge that the Lexington is facing, with 50% of respondents identifying it as one of the three biggest challenges. Not surprising then, if you want to flip to the second one, that then followed up to be when it came to what the city's top priority ought to be. Housing was listed number one again, almost 50%, listing it as one of their top three priorities. But the interesting thing to me is, if you want to turn to the third one, which is listed as Q5 there for you, when it came to then types of new development that folks would like to see in Lexington, the shops and restaurants and retail shops had risen to the top. Renovation of existing buildings, which can include residential, was next, and housing in some ways kind of got pushed a little bit farther down the list, with things that are a little bit more I guess fun or exciting, like mixed use development or parks and open space or grocery stores, rising above condos and single family residential and townhomes. That's not closer toward the middle of the pack in terms of the types of new development that folks would like to see. If you want to flip to the next one, which is Q8, we also asked residents to rate different aspects of Lexington housing stock. I know this graph is a little bit hard to see or to read intuitively, but the short answer, or the short version of it, is that across all three of those metrics, the quality, affordability, and variety, the majority of responses were either in the average to poor situation, with quality of housing being relatively average, affordability being relatively poor, and then variety a little bit in between the two, but more on the poor end of the spectrum. which again, I think speaks to why it had risen to the top of the challenge issues that had been identified at the first two questions that we looked at. So then if you want to flip to the next one, which is listed as Q7, the types, I guess this is zeroing in on not just all types of new development, but zeroing in on residential development specifically. We're just asked the types of housing and residential development that was most needed. And starter and smaller homes had risen, was the top one with the 60% of folks identifying as one of their top three. Affordable rental housing was next, with apartments and mixed income housing coming almost tied in third and fourth behind that. So just wanted to provide that as a little bit of context as we jumping into the chapter itself in terms of shaping how we think about housing in Lexington. And then I guess very quickly to walk through the chapter, as has been the case with all the previous chapters, it just gives an overview of the existing conditions with, in most cases, updated data, and then kind of walks through the partnerships and initiatives, as well as a couple of major planning efforts that have been undertaken in recent years, and highlighting the key recommendations and strategies that were a part of it. The one question that I wanted to, or issue that I wanted to bring to your attention, question for how you would like us to handle it, it was just when it came to all of the maps that are listed there, you'll notice that those are in fact the previous maps are included in the previous comprehensive plan, so that the data and the numbers listed there, the totals are the updated data, but the maps themselves are not. And so my question for y'all was as to whether or not, in terms of best representing or what would be most helpful for y'all in shaping the conversation around housing within the city of Lexington, is whether or not it would be most helpful to have simply updated versions of those block group level maps, or if you'd prefer to have a visual of all of those same topic areas of population, housing units, household size, the tenure, as well as just how long folks have been living there and the vacancy rates are a lot of, because my recommendation would be to have some of them, like population housing units, remain as the map, but for others, like say the percentage of folks who have moved in to that household before 1979, to represent that with, say, a pie chart that shows that by like folks by decade, in terms of like, you know, the percent of households that moved in before 1969 and between, and then in the 60s, 70s, 80s, et cetera. And same thing with, say, the housing vacancy rate, that could be done as a line graph or as a table instead of a map by block group. So open to your guidance as to which of those you'd prefer, and if it's helpful for y'all to see the vacancy rate and the percent. There's a couple of those data points that with the most recent 2024 ACS data that just came out last month are not represented at the block group level. Many of them still are, but that's often kind of dependent on the number of, sometimes with these data points, when you, how to put that, when there's fewer, it's just an example. So like, if there's a relatively few households who are, say, in block group 1 who are have a mortgage cost over 30%, if there's relatively few, for privacy reasons, the Census Bureau won't release that data because there's a chance that people track out and figure out who that is, and so they won't release it at the block group level, but they would at the city level or census tract level or that kind of thing. So there are a couple of these data points that I think we will have to tweak and change to be a graph or chart anyway, but was curious as to get your thoughts and opinions on whether or not you'd like to see most of these, as many as data points as possible, represented in a map form as it was before, if that is helpful to see that geographic breakdown across the board with many of these different data points.
I'd like to offer a few comments and
please.
ask a few questions about that.
Absolutely.
So you're saying that some of the data won't be amenable to mapping, block grant mapping?
There
because you don't
are.
have the data.
That is correct. So I know for sure that population, housing units, and household size, and I know for sure those are available at the block group level, but there are a few, I believe, for example, the percentage that moved in before a certain amount of time, like before 1979 on map 7.6, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe that one is not available at the block group level. I probably could do it at census tract level instead, if that would be preferable to keep it mapped that way, but it would not be available at the block group level.
I think having block group level information would be good.
Yeah.
Especially since some of the data is not available for the
Mhm, mhm.
university students.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
So it would be my preference to see
Yeah.
most of it done in block group if possible.
Okay. So for all data points in which the data is available to
Yep.
go ahead and update the maps as is.
Have you
Absolutely.
updated these maps in this handout that we have? From what was sent to us?
No, I do not believe
A
so.
lot of the maps were just repeated.
Yes, I believe all of the maps in there are repeats from the previous chapter, absolutely, or the previous comp plan. That is correct.
No, not that. They're copies of each other. So
Oh.
for example, see
Oh,
where
and
we get this. Where does this start?
housing vacancy and renter occupied.
Yeah, if you look at
Oh, gotcha.
7.6, for
Uh-huh,
example,
uh-huh.
it's got the same numbers as
Right.
7.2. 7.7
Correct.
is the same numbers as, well, no, that one's new. No, it's the same as 7.5. 7.7 is the same as 7.5. Jeremy, I sent you this and.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Thank you.
you don't need to write that down, I don't think.
Mhm.
Anyway, that struck me as
Yeah,
an issue.
for sure. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments on
I
that?
agree that the block form would be nice to see.
Okay,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So then for 7.6, the one that's not available at the block group level, that's well, sorry, on page 9 of your packet, percent of households that moved in before 1979. Anyway,
Pie chart would be fine
chart.
for me.
Okay, perfect.
And the data, the appendices will be updated as well.
Correct.
with
Mhm.
Recent data.
Absolutely.
Will we get a chance to review the appendices?
Yeah, I believe if I'm remembering correctly, I think the appendices might have been along with. I'm trying to make sure I'm not speaking incorrectly. I know that I believe it was one of the first chapters that I sent out that that sections of the appendices were sent out, including some of the baseline demographic information. There are other sections of it. I'm going to forget which letters, like some of the transportation data and the like that were not updated yet. What that will be when the transportation chapter comes.
The numbers that underlie some of this information,
Yeah.
I'd like
Yeah.
to have a chance to review that
For sure.
again. If
Okay.
I missed it the first time.
For sure, 100%. And I can also make sure that if the current appendices didn't include some of this housing specific data, we can definitely add an additional one that would include some of those the more detailed tables that lay a lot of this data out. That'd be very doable.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. I also recommend that the survey information
Uh-huh.
be added to
Absolutely.
the appendix.
Perfect.
On talking about these block maps, you mentioned 7.7. And really on the vacancy rate, you know, and it talks about in the narrative that our vacancy rate is very, very low. And so I think the block map altogether is going to be, when it has the right data even, it's going to be
Yeah.
misleading.
Sure.
So on that one, I wouldn't mind not even having the block map, but have the information
Yeah.
in the text form. And if there's another way to show it, just the
Uh-huh.
fact that the important fact is that our vacancy rate is very low. It may look higher, but they're
Right.
second homes or not for rent.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that'll drive how many units of any type we can and should build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Any other thoughts or comments related to the planning context?
Just on the
Mhm.
block map for 7.3 on household size, it didn't actually give an average.
Mm-hmm.
It gave total, I assume that's total households. It's a lot of households.
Yeah, that number doesn't make any.
No, that's what I couldn't
Uh-huh.
figure. It seemed too big to be the total number of
It's-
households. And I
And the
think
maps in general just need
yeah,
attention.
For sure. Absolutely.
probably makes more sense just to have what the overall average is.
Mhm.
The section on housing vacancy, I would recommend some careful reworking of that.
Okay.
I don't have it, I'm not Shannon, so I haven't done that for you, but I would recommend taking a
Yeah.
careful look at that section.
Okay.
The argument that's being made is very difficult. At least I couldn't follow it.
Which page are you on?
Well, I'm talking about
Yeah.
page,
You say vacancy, the
the
house,
vacancy
yeah,
section.
page 9.
Vacancy. You seem to be saying that the housing vacancy is high, which you rate at 22.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's comparatively high
Mm-hmm.
because it's a low figure.
Mm.
But likely inflated due to 1 in 5 being occasional use. Um, and comparatively quite low. Somehow it doesn't.
Yeah, I can certainly go back and
Doesn't
rework
follow.
it. I do know that it is kind of I guess a better way to put it is depending on which data source you look at, it seems that that particular issue um, um, could be like, I guess that narrative could be told several different ways, because if you look at just the American Community Survey data, it makes it look like the vacancy rate is extremely high. But I know in the housing study and the data that our consultant was doing the regional housing study, a lot of the data they were looking at least as it related to the rental market in particular, I believe, was making it see that it was one of the higher or the tightest housing markets in our region. And those two things don't seem to make sense together. And so I think that attempt to, or like the noting of how a significant number of those are either second homes or Airbnbs or recreational homes, like tries to sort of explain why the 22% number might be that high. But I think you're right that it certainly does need some additional massaging to try to make that make sense of those very seemingly conflicting data points.
I think what we had a previous housing done in 2016 and they used basically realtor data that said
Yeah.
the percent of houses available for rent or sale.
Sure.
And that was an extremely low number.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that truly tells you what your vacancy rate, 'cause
Sure.
it doesn't matter if it's not being used, it's what is available for long-term rental or sale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it doesn't seem like they should be able to include the second homes. I mean, they're
Right.
obviously never gonna be vacant or rent or.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if it's short-term rental
Right.
shouldn't count. It
Yeah.
should be.
I think it's sort of hard when they're trying to develop the survey to apply across the
Sure,
board,
sure.
because
Makes sense.
it might have been vacant when they came to the door to give the survey, but then why is it vacant? So it is a tough thing to
Right.
parse through. But
We're still talking about the housing, the context, planning context.
Yeah.
So can I make a comment about something under housing value?
oh
Have
yes,
we
yes,
gotten to
please.
that yet?
Absolutely.
So, regional housing study, found that Lexington's median home price increased by 76% between 2014 and 2022. That seems like a really high number. You look at it, it's eye-popping.
Yeah.
But if you annualize that and look at it from a yearly percentage, it comes out to like 6.5% per
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
It's really not that high. So I think it would be better to compare because the point you're trying to make, I think, is that it's high compared to income. So show what income increased
Okay. Yeah.
over the same period of time. That would make the point, I think.
Absolutely. I like that idea a lot.
So this is a problem that sort of crops up occasionally throughout the chapter. that the institutional rental issue,
Hmm.
you say that rent was the highest of any locality in the central Shenandoah region. And I wonder what impact WNL, for
Mhm.
example, has on that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I imagine that their on-campus rental is being factored into this number.
Very well could be. Yeah,
I don't know if it's high or low, but I would expect it to be higher.
yeah.
Uh,
Would it be helpful to make a note of that after that point to say that this could be due in part
Yeah,
to
I don't know how
that.
you want to handle
Yeah.
that, but somehow you do make the point up front in this chapter that that WNL and VMI are sometimes included in the data and sometimes not included in the data, and sometimes if they're included, they're going to skew the data. It all makes sense, but
Yeah.
I think pointing it out when when it makes a serious impact would be a good idea
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
in the narrative.
Hmm.
You on subsidized housing, you point out that there are 10 apartments in the region with rents subsidized by section 515. That's it? Wow, that's an incredibly low number. But
Yeah.
if that's what it is, that's what it is. And that you say regional, do you mean Rockbridge as well as Lexington?
If I'm remembering correctly, I believe that is sort of in the Lexington area, which would include some of some of the area it's immediately surrounding Lexington, but I'd have to go back and double check that to know for sure.
I think this was also included in in the current
Uh-huh.
version. And we may not have caught it, but I also have a note here that we have 2 low-income housing tax credit projects in Lexington, even though there's already a note that says, good, be careful with those because after a period of time,
Mhm.
that subsidy
Yeah.
goes away. But that's Lexington House and Windermere, and both of those have been updated since I've been here. So in the last 10 years, and they have many more than 10 units just across those 2 projects, just as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just in terms of specificity of language too, I guess it doesn't actually specify whether it's 10 apartment units or 10 apartment buildings, which is something that probably ought to be specified. Yeah.
Does it help if I get you the number of units that we have in both?
Sure. Yeah.
Even though knowing
great.
full well that within a fairly short period of
Uh-huh.
time, they may not
Yeah.
be subsidized anymore or or
Well, they've been subsidized for a long time, though.
for 15 years. It basically buys down the rent in that program for a 15-year period, as I think I understand it.
I was thinking
it's
10,
not-
but you're probably right. It
You
is
think
15.
they're gonna change?
They don't have to, but they
okay.
have the ability. That program where they're given money from the federal source
Mhm.
that basically buys down rents to keep them affordable for a period of time, which
Yeah.
is either 10 or 15 years. And at the end of that, they can go to market rate. They can look for another
Mhm.
program of some sort. So they have the option as the owner at that point.
And then there's also Mountain View Terrace too, that's HUD housing. It's subsidized.
I guess you don't happen to remember when those were originally constructed.
Mountain View's a good bit ago.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what program. I'm not sure if it's a
LIHTC
LIHTC or a 515. I have no idea.
I'm sorry to do this, but I'd like to jump back to page
Mhm.
8. Yeah. This will be my last comment I think on this. So housing tenure.
Hmm.
You talk about absentee landlords in there. And I get that that's an issue. That makes sense. But I'm unclear or I think it's obscured the relationship between that and placing an additional competitive pressure on long-term rentals, residents and local workers seeking rental units.
Hmm.
Why does Why does absentee landlordism and lower maintenance standards lead to that?
Yeah, I think that the main, you're probably right that those ideas could be pulled apart, but I think normally the idea would be is if there's a lot of absentee landlords, which could contribute, let's say if there's a lot of either, Airbnbs, or if there are a lot of homes that sit vacant most of the year, then that's homes that are taken away from folks who might actually just need to find a place to live. So in that way, it's just like fewer homes on the market
I get
available
that,
to, for sure.
But low
Um,
low maintenance standards?
I think generally the idea would be that if you're like living in your home and a part of the community, that this isn't always the case, but often leads to you take care of your home and your property more so than say folks who are farther away. So I can certainly pull those two ideas apart.
And I
but
get that.
yeah,
Both of those make perfect sense, but
sure.
they're not related. At least I don't see the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I guess to your point of them one contributing to the other, that makes sense. So I think it would be, I guess, clearer if we had two separate sentences related to that of like pick
Maybe.
those apart so that
Or,
the
yeah, or else make the connection clear. Whichever.
yeah, okay, for sure. Just make sure that those two ideas don't become conflated.
They are conflated in the current text.
For sure,
So-
absolutely,
So either explain that or take it out.
absolutely.
That's most of my I have other comments that are in the document that I sent you
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
are word choice kind
Uh-huh.
of things.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate you sending those over.
On planning context.
Good comments.
Awesome. So then moving to partnerships and initiatives, is open to thoughts as to if there's anything that is either missing from more recent initiatives that the city has undertaken. Excuse me. Or if there is any of the information about any of those existing programs that is still in need of further updating.
The rental inspection, we've talked about that and
Mm.
there doesn't seem to be any intention of putting any money towards
No.
that. And then threshold seemed like it needed to be a little bit beefed up with the homeowner helper program. Don't you think?
I had the same note.
Okay.
Mhm.
I could provide some information
Yeah.
for that, or if it's a brand new program.
Yeah, absolutely. Then after that was simply just a summary of the regional housing study and then the Lexington housing study that was completed in early 2025.
I'm curious, what is a spot blight abatement program?
That would be, say, I guess even the homeowner helper program might be considered something to that end of spot blight would be just like a single home that is in need of repair, and then the program would be to help repair the home that is in need of repair. I guess that'd be what that is the
It's-
idea.
It's a cool phrase, but it's not immediately
Uh-huh.
intuitively.
Okay,
uh,
we can certainly tweak that language.
The community land trust, I'm not sure what that is and how that supports this.
Yeah, community land trust it would be, the technical term would be, it's a shared equity model where essentially the land trust, there's one called the Virginia Statewide Land Trust. We'll use that as an example. The land trust would say purchase the property and would sell the building that is located on top of the land, but would actually maintain ownership of the land underneath it, thereby controlling exactly how much the home could then be resold for. The purpose of it was to ensure that home remains affordable in perpetuity over the long term, because the home on top of it is basically, or the land is basically leased with the stipulation that if you resell the home, you can only resell it for, say, X% over what you purchased it for. So it's a model of ensuring that a home that kind of like with the example of the affordable apartment buildings, at some point those units become market rate, and that's true of almost all forms of affordable housing except for through the community land trust, because it's the only one that ensures that it stays affordable in perpetuity. The drawback is that it limits the amount of equity that the homeowner can accrue through the ownership of their home. So it definitely has its pros and cons. I think it's a tool to be used in the toolbox. It's definitely not the end all, like the be all end all answer to housing, because nothing is, but it's at least a tool that's in the toolbox for certain homes, particularly I think for like starter homes, because that's I think how I generally think of it as being a way if you can have a few homes that are within a land trust or community land trust, that would ensure that there are a stock of homes that would be affordable for folks with their first home. They get a little bit of equity, then hopefully buy the next home after that. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, for sure.
This is a question maybe for Arnie, and then just a comment. You bring up the cottage housing here for aging, and we also talked
Mhm.
about like first home starter houses, how the community needs both of those things. I know we approved cottage housing, but do we have any plans for cottage housing going on yet that we could include in here? So
No, in the
just
sense
fill
that
in
we've made
discussion forum.
the change to the ordinance and it's available for people, but we have not received any interest in a cottage housing
Okay.
development.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was something we could add in there, if it was
If somebody
already,
had,
yeah, like was already talking about doing it or anything, so.
unfortunately, no.
If there are no other comments on the partnerships and studies, we can move on to the needs assessment, which
Got one
please,
really
absolutely.
little one.
Yeah, please.
On the windshield survey results
Uh-huh.
map,
Yes.
it's not immediately apparent what the scale, which
What?
side of the scale is the positive and which side is negative.
For sure.
You can sort of figure it out, but
Better labels as to what 1 to 5 means would be.
real
Yeah.
simple label. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So with the needs assessment, the needs that were listed based on all the data and the studies that were done was first just the preservation expansion of affordable housing opportunities, and then related to just diversifying the existing housing stock, additional multifamily and rental housing. Again, some of those are carryovers from the previous comp plan as well. The preservation of the quality of the existing housing stock through through rehabilitation of aging and dilapidated homes, which the homeowner helper program is well on its way to trying to do. The new age, new age friendly housing opportunities, including age restricted multifamily and senior living, continued promotion of adaptive reuse and revitalization, which speaks to the surveyed the question that was asking for the types of development. A broader mix of housing, again, trying to just have usually the more wider array of housing options that are available, the more one just it better fits the needs of the individual community, but also can help to keep housing prices down a little bit. And then the continued exploration and expansion of innovative housing solutions, with the cottage housing as an example of that. And then the protection of neighborhood character by limiting encroachment from commercial uses, etc. Are there any other, I guess, any tweaks to the language of those needs? And then secondarily, is there any other, do you think that fully captures the needs as Lexington or as in your current situation, or if there's any others that ought to be added? Hearing none, we can move on to the goals, objectives, and strategies. And at least there's a couple of these that we already sounds like we can cut out, including the one at the very bottom, 5.4, of reevaluating the rental housing inspection program. It sounds like that would be a good a strategy to remove if that has been already evaluated. And I thought there was one more that was gonna. I think the other thought I had is whether or not we'd want to make a strategy or include a strategy specific to the properties that the city does own, particularly the Spotswood and VDOT properties, if that was a something you'd like to address explicitly within the goals, objectives, and strategies, or if the more broad terms that are already included there address that sufficiently.
I think 3.3 looks,
Mhm.
covers it pretty well.
Perfect.
On 1.1, you might be more specific, on the second part of that with the local revolving loan fund to finance rehabilitation of housing with the homeowner helper program. And we can mark it in that there's progress made.
And I would wonder out loud if we still need 1.2.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at, I was looking at 2.1. I thought, oh yeah, I guess. Yeah, right. We can mark that one as
Yeah.
done.
And the
1.2, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And one, perhaps other one for consideration, 5.1, partner with local organizations to educate the public about heating systems, window repair, storm windows, roof ventilation, and other energy saving features suitable for existing buildings. We already have HGTV, so does staff really need to do that? And we're not great at the educational component, I'll admit to that. So I'm just wondering out loud whether or not that one should remain.
I think that one's pretty aspirational, but I don't know that anybody's working on it specifically, other than, like you said, HDTV and
Change it
Lowe's.
to make sure everyone has a cable subscription.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, no other thoughts or comments. I can wrap it up and get out of your hair. But thanks as always for walking through this with me, and we'll definitely get a revised version of this out soon, along with some of the other chapters, and be on the lookout for the transportation chapter next time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. I'd like to open the floor for public comment on this agenda item. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to make a statement, we'd be happy to have you do that. Hearing none, we'll close that section. I guess we've had our commission discussion, sort of, along the way. If anyone has anything else they'd like to add?
No.
Cory? I guess I'll close this agenda item and move to the next. Next agenda item is CPA 2025-01, which looks familiar. Looks like the same number.
Oh, did we not? Oh, no, sorry. It is the same application because it's
Sure.
one comprehensive plan amendment with all the different
That
chapters.
makes sense.
Sorry.
Comprehensive Plan Review Land Use Chapter follow-up for 3 properties discussed at the last meeting.
Mhm.
Do we have a staff report, Arnie?
Indeed. As you may recall during the last meeting where we were talking particularly about the future land use map. So that's the map. If we have a rezoning, somebody wants to rezone a piece of property, we look at what is already foretold in the future land use map. How does that direct us for use, for corridors, for open space and other things? And towards the end of that discussion, I brought up a couple of properties, and I'm going to send that to now 3 properties. And there was not hesitancy, but a desire for additional information. So starting on page 21, that photograph at the top is the existing house that's on the piece of property at 140 Evergreen Place. So if you drive past Evergreen Cemetery and you run into the bypass, which is a big hill at that point, there's a house on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is some undeveloped property that's zoned commercial. And then you see the back part of Sheets, just as an example. So we have this house that's there, and we were fortunate to buy the property from Dr. Knox that allowed us to subdivide the house off from the rest of it, and the rest of the property was added to Evergreen Cemetery. So now we have additional burial space there. So we're very thankful for that. The question becomes, it is currently in the R1 zoning district. And if we flip over to the other map on page 22, the current future land use map, that it has a designation of conservation and open space. That doesn't present a problem. It's just if somebody wanted to do something else with the house, they really couldn't do much with it. Yes, they could perhaps do a little addition, but if they wanted to turn it to commercial, they certainly couldn't do that. They'd have to come in for a rezoning and a comprehensive plan amendment at the same time, which is fine for both of those things to come in at once. So I don't know if we wanted to sort of memorialize the actual use on the property, which is residential, and change the color from the conservation open space green to one of our residential designations. Again, it's not necessary to do that, but do we want to just sort of acknowledge that it is a residential use on that property?
Yeah.
Yeah, I drove by there, and it's visible also from the bypass,
Uh-huh.
quite visible. Not a place for residents in not a really desirable location.
Well, and it could, and the city will put some covenants or has talked about putting some covenants on it when we sell it to make sure that it's an appropriate use for next to the cemetery. That was one of the suggestions brought up. But I would suggest at least making it mixed use so that if they chose to like do it for a short-term rental, it might be, because you're right, it's somebody did live there for a long time, but it takes a special person who wants to live kind of isolated there. It would provide more options for that, and it would still be appropriate being next to the cemetery. If the city didn't think it wasn't appropriate for it to be there, we wouldn't sell that, for that space to be used, we wouldn't sell that house, but as of now, we do plan to sell the house.
I could imagine it probably will become a short-term rental if you designate it as that, then, or allow that.
Yeah.
Even short-term rentals, just to be clear, it can be in one of the residential districts also. It doesn't have to go to mixed use necessarily.
Yeah, so
Or short-term.
for like residential, like commercial. That's I was thinking
speaking
like
of-
if you want to zone it to that in the future, would you put it as mixed use on your future
Okay,
land use?
if you want to allow it so that the person can not be there at all and just operate it
Right.
as a short-term rental full-time without having a primary resident. Okay. that
Yeah.
wasn't catching
And I
that.
think that's also appropriate because it is kind of a transition spot
Yeah.
between the open space and the commercial center right across the street. Gives you a few more options, but still appropriate.
The sensitivity to the cemetery is the prime issue for me. I think that's important, but mixed use, being next to the commercial area does make sense.
Okay, so you do we will have protection of the cemetery through the covenants and restrictions as the city sees to put on it when it is transferred or when it's offered for sale. And the other way is to not do a change now to one of these, but that's up to you on how much you want to open it up now or to go ahead and change the designation. Again, it's just a little bit of an oddity there, a house that's in the middle of the conservation open space.
Well, if we didn't change it now, then you're saying when it goes for sale, if somebody has a use for it, then they would have to come before zoning and.
They had to
Two
do two
different
things,
things.
rezone it and then potentially rezone it and then also come in for a future land use map amendment. So either we do it now in anticipation or we make them do it and then have the public hearings at that time.
It does make it more marketable, I think, if we, at least on the future land use map, go ahead and do that,
Provide more interest in the property if it's
right?
not a terribly important decision. I just was trying to bring up some inconsistencies potentially.
I wonder, I know John seemed interested in it at the last meeting.
Mhm.
And I wonder
Mm.
if it's possible to carry this one over.
Sure, absolutely. We'll probably do that with all three of them as you direct us to, but just wanted to bring a little bit more information on this particular property.
Yeah,
forward.
thank you.
We're okay for the next one. The next one that also has a little bit of an oddity are the RARO and Health Department parcels. So in the photograph there, you see RARO and you see a fence line there on the left-hand side, which I'll try to include. So the fence line and then RARO building, which is an old residential building, I presume, and then the Health Department building. And then to show those on the parcel map, all of those parcels, there are a number of lots there, as you can tell, and the buildings don't really line up with the lots, and I don't have an explanation for that necessarily. Just to be aware, there's also an alley, so if you were to go through McLaughlin Street, you have to turn up White Street, but here it's showing a couple of alleys there. Those are just paper streets. They weren't obviously developed in any way, but they do exist. So that's just a sort of a placeholder to show you where the Health Department and RARO buildings are with respect to existing lots that are throughout that hill.
So I went to a website called historicareals.com. Do you know that one? It's
Yeah.
a fun website.
Yeah.
You can type in an address and it'll bring up all the historic areals that they have, that this company has gotten rights to. And there are quite a few. And this area, this is this now which is a park space behind RARO and the Health Department towards Woods Creek, was littered with these linear structures
Ones that had,
until the
Little-
60s, early 60s.
Little Quonset huts or something like a Quonset hut.
Were they housing units?
yeah, right after World War II, they built all those housing units on that property. So
Yeah.
there are water lines and things below.
I think the alley probably was a street at that
Mhm.
time. So it's what's marked an alley now. I can't figure out why that lot is drawn along Highland. That lot is drawn so large. And that presents a quandary for me because I personally would like to see the zoning or the future land map show something for this area that's currently occupied by RARO and the Health Department. So it can be used and can be housing, for example, in the future. But I don't know that I want to see that extended all the way to Jordan to the south.
I would agree with you because that's the in-town sledding hill. So we certainly
Right.
can't go all the way over. We would be in severe trouble if we tried to attempt that. That's why I was trying to also point out where the fence is that's on the left-hand side of the RARO building.
Yeah.
Just as maybe that's a good
So
place
would,
marker.
if we wanted to restrict the future land use to that area occupied currently by RARO and the Health Department, would we have to redraw the lot lines?
I would just recommend that if you're going to put a line there for a different future land use designation than the current one, which is parks and open space, to perhaps pick one of the lot lines that's there and follow it. Now, obviously, the big one that's cutting across, you're going to have to bisect that in a way.
So pick one of the existing skinny long lots and
Correct.
just extend it all the way to Highland.
And I tried on page 25 to give an example of that. That would be my recommendation.
That works for me.
Mhm. I would agree.
And not that we're trying to kick the health department out or kick RARO out, but RARO is on a path most likely to be somewhere else in the somewhat near future. I think that's safe to say. And we've heard whispers or rumors, nothing confirmed, that the health department may also at some point not want to occupy that space anymore. But nothing concrete on that. Just so looking again in the future, we now want to change while we're doing this review, the future land use map and particularly the designation for these properties to either sort of codify what's already there, which are certainly not residential uses and certainly not open space uses, into something else. And just on page 25, option 1, leave them as they are. And that way, if somebody comes in, or if we have a need for a different zoning district, then right now they're city-owned properties. So we would be coming in and doing a rezoning and a future land use map designation change. Or option 2, go ahead and change these to either the traditional neighborhood, which you see around there. And another option is to perhaps add some mixed use in, because all the properties along McLaughlin, including the property right at the corner of McLaughlin and White, that's already a condo building, and I cannot recall how many. I think there are about 13 units in there, but don't hold me to that.
Mhm.
The other anomaly over there also that I did not realize when I first mentioned this at the last meeting, but the hospice properties. So there's 2 there, one where the building is actually located in the parking lot is that other property that's also outlined on page 25. So the same sort of conversation or consideration that we're applying to RARO and Health Department parcels should perhaps also be thought about for the hospice parcels. And no decisions have to be made if we want to extend this discussion to another meeting when we have more membership present.
I'd like to see more input from other commissioners.
And I agree. I would suggest on the Raw Road property, make it traditional neighborhood and maybe consider for hospice, making it mixed use.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Would you like those no, we'll just leave it as is. So not making changes and just bring it forward as is so that everybody has a shot. Okay.
Yeah.
I think so.
We'll
Yes.
include that in your next packet.
The water drainage area that's been discussed is below that, correct?
I looked it
Yeah.
up just to make sure. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Below that.
So it would have zero impact on that. Okay,
So down.
yeah,
So if we're around the corner, it's everything below towards the creek.
okay,
The alleyway would be here, so we're not impacting.
that, okay.
Right. Yep. No, I know where it is.
I had to look up the same thing to make sure that we're not, so that thing, area, for the new DMP down in the White Street. So that's below McLaughlin. So it will not be the same area discussing.
Nice. Did you say you had a third property you wanted to discuss? Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you for that report. Is there any public comment on this? Would like to invite folks to come forward and speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to the commission discussion, which I feel we've had. Anyone have anything they'd like to offer or add? Close this section of the agenda. Move to other business. Zoning and planning report, Arnie.
No report.
City council report, Leslie.
The only item, and I actually thought Arnie was going to cover it, but City Council has directed staff to put together a resolution to have Planning Commission look at townhouses. Specifically, one of our requirements on townhouses is that they shall front or be accessed by a public street. And we'd like to either delete or amend that. So I think, Arnie, what's your schedule for?
There's going to be a resolution to initiate by council. So we always have to have that initiation of a text amendment. And then I will bring it forward for you on March 12th for a discussion. And it's really 4 simple standards for townhouses, and one says must be accessed by or must front on or be accessed by a public street. So that's the only thing that we're really looking for clarification, if we just delete it or find another way to allow townhouses to also be accessed by driveways. It's just really limiting how we can access a larger piece of property, such as Spotswood as an example. And we had this previously with the Spotswood Collaborative. They proposed in one of the 3 proposals was a townhouse development. And if you just require everybody to have access to a public street, then they either have to pull a public street in to get units on the backside of the property. And a public street is 50-foot right away if we follow VDOT standards. And that's just far too much space being eaten up and is an inefficient use of space. So that's why the request. So actually the question was about scheduling. So at the next meeting, council will have a resolution. They're going to initiate this amendment, direct you all to do it on the 12th of March, which is your first meeting. We will have that general discussion that we always have before an advertised public hearing at your next meeting to do the formal public hearing for this. And then it'll go to council that second meeting in April.
I'm glad you filled in the details and explained why we were asking for this, because we don't have anything planned for either Spotswood or VDOT, but either we or the EDA will actively start marketing it, and that way we want there to be as many options as possible.
For what it's worth, I also asked this to be considered at one of our annual zoning text amendments a number of years ago. And at that time, because we're doing so many other amendments, their planning commission did not go forward with that. They wanted to look at townhouses holistically. But now it would be helpful if we could at least delete that one particular provision so that there is more flexibility on properties on how they could be developed. Now, even if Spotswood doesn't go forward with that type of a development and we don't need it, we still have the ability in the future to look at townhouses more holistically if we want to still go through that exercise of developing standards for it. Even if Spotswood does, or the other property does or doesn't have, there's already control, as we talked about a minute ago, when the city has the property, just like with Dr. Knox's, there can be covenants and restrictions. So getting rid of this doesn't all of a sudden open up something on those two properties while we're perhaps looking at townhouses more holistically in the future. It just allows a better, more efficient use of the property.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
Nothing else?
That's it.
I suppose we're at the point of the agenda where somebody could make a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
I.
Conundrum is you can't really vote on a motion, so.
Right.
can't really
Right, that's it. We're not staying here all night.
Thank you all for your indulgence.
Thank you, Charlie.